So today, I'm finally going to be installing this Redodo Power 40 amp MPPT smart charge controller. I can't wait. Oh. Let me show you some of the stuff I've got going on. So I've got all my parts that I need here. I've got my battery cables. I've got 8-gauge wire. Now they recommend using 7-gauge, but I couldn't find 7-gauge wire, so I'm going to be using 8. 8 has more than enough rating for what I'm going to be putting into it. It says that this charge controller can take a maximum input voltage of 100 volts and a maximum of 600 watts of solar. So I'm going to be putting 2 of these used panels that I got from Santan Solar. These are each 250 watts. So I'm going to be running 500 watts. So I'm going to be below the system's maximum rating, and this should work out really, really well. There's 2 of them. What I've done is, you can see I've already installed some brackets on them, and I'm going to be building a frame out of 2x4s just like I did with my other solar array. I'm going to hook these up in series, so we're going to be running high voltage, low amp. So I'm not worried at all and about the power that I'm going to be running. So the way I'm going to be running this setup is the charge controller is going to be getting 500 watts of maximum solar. I'm going to be running at about 65 volts, 8 amps. Coming in from the charge controller. So that's going to be running through 10-gauge solar wire, which is way, way, way overrated for what I'm going to be running. So it's going to run nice and cool. This should be putting out somewhere around 30 amps to the batteries, which is going to be running through the 8-gauge wire, and the 8-gauge wire is rated at 55 amps. So we're well below the rating. I like to stay below 3/4 of the maximum rating. That way you're always safe. I'm also going to be running through a set of breakers, so this is going to be very well set up, and I have a real good feeling about the whole thing. So let me show you. So here's my solar wire coming in. I drilled a hole through the shipping container, and I used a standard 1/2-inch electrical conduit fitting to keep the sharp edges off of the wire, and then I'm going to seal up that hole with silicone. So the wires are going to go in right here into the bottom of the charge controller. The 2 batteries are going to go right here, and then I have an inverter, which I'll show you in a separate video, that I'm going to be installing right here. So the whole thing's going to be contained in this one little area down here. And this is actually the coolest place in the entire shipping container. So this wall right here stays in the shade most of the summer. So this is going to work out really well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mount these feet that are included onto here, and then they can be used in a multitude of positions, and then that allows me to screw directly into this piece of wood that I have, and that allows the heatsink plenty of room to work. So I'm going to do it that way instead of having it flush mounted, which I could also do. Okay, there's a little bit of paint on the threads, so I'm going to just crank it around and get through that paint. And I'm going to mount them in this orientation instead of off to the side, because my board is not quite wide enough, and the board is cut for the space that I've got it down in there. So go ahead and tighten it up appropriately. There we go. So I got 3 more to do. Go ahead and turn this around to the right position. Wow, that's nice and tight. That'll work. That will work. All right, I'm going to turn the unit around so it's closer to me. Now I could have used this template if I wanted to use these screw holes where you put a screw in, not quite all the way, and then you hang it on that. But I want to make sure that it's in there really firmly, so I'm going to use the included feet. Plus, like I said, it gets the heat sink away from the wall or away from the piece of wood, and it gives it a little bit more room to breathe. So that's how I'm going to do it. But you could mount it either way. All right, there it is. Now I'm going to turn it over, and I'm going to mount it to this piece of wood. And then once I've mounted it to the piece of wood, all I have to do is just zip the piece of wood up there into the place I have for it. So this is going to work out really well. No need to over torque them. I'm just going nice and easy. Here we go. So now I've installed another board right here, and all I have to do is mount this right like that, and then the inverter is going to go across here above it. So this is going to work out really well. Okay, I think I'm gonna take and get the screws started on this board ahead of time, just to make it a little easier when I get up there. That way I don't have to hold the screws. This is just an old installer's trick right here. Guys have been doing this kind of stuff for years and years and years. There we go. So see what I did is I put the screws on up in the corners ahead of time. So I'll show you how that works when I get it up in there. See if I can get the camera to catch all this. Okay, so I'm going to hold it up right here. I'm going to make sure that my board for the other unit has got room to go up here. And right there it does. So I'll go ahead and move it down about another ½ an inch right there. See that? Now, I like using the trick of mounting to a board, and then you can just put the board in there. That way it comes out nice and clean. You're not in there fighting yourself, because this is kind of a small space underneath a shelf where I'm putting this. So, and see what I mean by having it out away from the board. It's going to have plenty of cooling. So that's going to work out really well. So I'm down here getting ready to start on the wiring. First thing you always want to do is you want to take these terminals and you want to make sure and back the screw all the way out, because it's what's called a crush fit. It's going to go up inside there and the screw is going to crush down on it. So you want to make sure they're adjusted all the way out. Otherwise, when you put the wire up in there, it's not going to go. So these were turned all the way in, so you wouldn't have been able to get the wire in there, and then you would have probably messed the wire up. So this is definitely the way to do it. I just turn it until, hear it keep hitting that stop. That means that it's all the way out. Okay, so you can see I've got the wire stripped, and I've got my 10mm connector here, and I've got my piece of heat shrink. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give this a good crimp. I've got my crimps right here. I'm going to get the crimper positioned, and now I'm going to give it a good squeeze. And there it is. It's crimped on. Now I'm going to put the heat shrink up here, And I'm going to go ahead and shrink that on. Just going to give it a little bit of heat, nice and gentle from both sides. Even though this heat shrink is a little bit big, it'll shrink down on there nicely. You can actually use heat shrink that's too big and it'll still work just fine. You can see that I've got a nice shrink all the way around on it. So there we go. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing with the negative. So I'm going to strip it. So same thing, I'm going to strip about 5/8 of an inch. It's a little bit more than a half. There we go. Got my wire stripped. Checking it over, I can see that I did not nick the strands at all. So that's ready to go in. So now I'm going to do the short pigtail that's going to go from the breaker. So this is going to go on the one side of the breaker, and then the other wire is going to go from there up into the charge controller, just like that. Go, give it a nice little twist. Put it inside of the fitting. Put it inside of our hydraulic press. Sure and put this back in there. Okay, I'm ready for my crimp. I'm going to give it a nice tight crimp. Crimp it down all the way. Okay, there we go. See that? It's crimped on there nicely. Now I'm going to put my heat shrink on there. Move my heat shrink up to the appropriate position here, and now I'm going to shrink it. Yes, I could be using my heat gun, but it's a lot to get set up. I don't have power run out here yet, so this is just much easier. Okay, so now I've got that done. Now I'm going to strip this other end that's going to go up into the controller. There we go. Got a nice stripped end on it. Okay, now I'm going to come over here to the controller and I'm going to wire these in. So this is the positive coming from the panel. So here we go. And get it put up into there. And now I'm going to tighten it down. Okay, I've got it good and tight. Give the wire a little tug. It's in there nicely. Okay, now I'm going to put the negative up in there. I'm going to take my slack and push it down under there. And same thing, let's get the negative put up in there where it goes. Okay, the negative is up in there. Now I'm going to tighten it up. There we go, nice and tight. Okay, give it a little tug, it's not going anywhere. So now I can attach this to my breaker. Now with a system this small, I probably am going to be just fine without running a breaker, but I'm going to go ahead and put one on anyway. So I'll show you what this looks like real quick. Let me go get my socket. Okay, there we go. That's tight. All right, so I'm gonna mount the breaker probably right about there, just like that. So let me go get a couple of screws for that. Okay, there's one. And let's get the second one mounted. There we go. Go ahead and pop the breaker. And this is where our positive from the panels comes in and hooks up right there. There we go. Go ahead and get that tightened up. There we go. Cover that with a cap. So, okay, sorry, the camera turned. It's not easy, people, to record a YouTube video when you're down in a tight space working by yourself. It kind of pays to have a cameraman, but I don't have one today. I'm working completely by myself, and this is what you get, so bear with me. Okay, let me bend that over. Okay, that's out of the way. All right, let's see if we can hook up our next two wires. I'm not sure if this size wire is going to fit up in there, but we're going to soon find out if it will go in there or not. Looks like it will just barely. Just barely. I might have had to take a few strands out of the way, but I think it's going to work. Yeah, it's already tightening down. That's good. It means it's in there. All right. So yeah, the wire is way oversized, but it still fits in the terminal. Like I said, just barely. It sure would be nice if it had just a little bit more room, but it's gonna work. Okay, same thing. Let's shove this one up in there. Okay. Yeah, same thing. It's kind of crushing in there and filling the entire space. Like I said, these wires are actually way too big to fit up inside of here, but you know what? It's not a bad thing to have them totally oversized. Okay, got that tightened up. All right, should have enough room to reach the batteries, so we're soon going to find out. Okay, so I've got the two 6-volt batteries moved in here, and these are my old batteries that I took out of the RV when we put in the lithium, so they're still good. They're 5 years old. Actually, they're coming up on 6 years old, but they've still got some life left in them, and I'm going to use them until they're done. They're only going to be powering the power out here in the shipping container, and mostly we're just going to be using it for lights and stuff. I'm not going to be putting a huge draw on them. So first thing I got to do is put my wire tying them back together, which this ties, if you know, this is running parallel, or actually this is running in series, which basically takes, you put your positive and negative together and it takes two 6-volt batteries and turns them into one 12-volt. So this gives me 400 amp hours of 12-volt power. So take my wrench, get these tightened down. Okay, they're good and tight. Now I've got 12-volt power. Let me check my length on these battery cables. There's my positive, which is going to go over here. So I think I can move it back just a little bit, and I'm going to move these back just a little ways. Okay, yep, that reaches nicely. And I can still get in there and mess with the charge controller, which is what I wanted to be able to do. I wanted to be able to get in there fairly easy, so there we go. All right, I'm going to take these two connections off, take the nuts off of them, and let's get those two hooked up. Okay, so here's my positive. You always want to hook up your positive first and your negative last. You don't get power with 12 volt until you hook up the negative, until basically the negative acts like a ground. All right, let's get this tightened down. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go over the top of this like that, actually, and that'll allow me to move it back even a little bit farther. Yep. That's going to allow me to go back just a smidge more, which is good. I wouldn't mind getting all the room that I can. Okay. There we go. Okay, that gave me, now as you can see, between the batteries and the charge controller, I've got a little bit of distance now, so I think that's going to work out just fine. All right, let me get this negative connected. All right, let's connect the negative. And there we go. You can see instantly the charge controller lit up. We've got power. We've got 12.9 volts, which means these batteries are full. That's awesome. That's good. Batteries are full. That's what we want. All right, let's grab the wrench. Give this a tighten. All right, it's tight. Okay. Okay, so first thing to do is take a measurement of these solar panels and find out what I'm going to cut my boards to. Okay, so they're 65 inches long. And 39 wide, so that means I'm going to go 78 by 65. Okay, let's go out and cut some boards at 78 by 65. There we go. One more. Okay, well, I'm out here filming with two GoPros today, and both of them overheated and turned off, so you did not get to see me finish the final part of assembling this solar array. But anyway, I've got it assembled. I've got the two panels hooked together, positive to negative, which is hooking them up in series, so we're running a higher voltage. And let's look real quick what the voltage is on these panels. Looks like 37 volts. So we're running about 72 volts, I would say. Probably more like about 68. And it looks like we're going to be running about like I said, 8 amps, maybe 8.5 total. So not bad. It says it recommends having them on a 30 amp circuit breaker. I've got them on a 30 amp circuit breaker. Let's go inside and see what it looks like. Yeah, here's the other overheated GoPro. It won't even turn on. It's been sitting for 45 minutes now and it still won't turn on. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of GoPros anymore. So anyway, here we go. Batteries are sitting at 12.8 volts. Let's go ahead and flip the breaker and watch this thing come alive with the solar. There we go. It now shows that we're bringing in solar from the panels. We've got a green light on the panels. So there we go. We're bringing in 13.6. So instantly, we're bringing in 14.4 volts going into the batteries. Like I said, 67 volts going in, 1.5 amps charge, it says. I have a feeling that because the batteries are full, it's not charging. There we go. It's saying the batteries are at 100%. To give you an idea of how much space this takes up, this is the shelving unit that it's sitting underneath. And like I said, the whole thing fits down under here really nicely. So I am very, very impressed. Look at that. Batteries are, yep, 68 volts. We're using 0 watts, or it shows 0 watts coming in from the panels. 0 amps going into the batteries. There we go. Got it on flooded lead acid batteries. It was set on lithium. Okay, that's better. Okay, so we've got the batteries selected now. Yep, says our batteries are 100%. 14.6 volts. 68 volts coming in from the panels. 0 watts of solar. That's because the batteries are full. Excellent. Okay, so I have got the Bluetooth app downloaded for the charge controller, and I've already got it hooked up. Our batteries are sitting at 100%. The voltage from the panels is 65.7. We're in float right now. The battery bank voltage is 13.8. It says we're using 10 watts of power, and that's because the inverter is on right now, 12 watts of power. So the inverter uses just a little bit. We have no DC load put on the charge controller, and it has all our values here. So we took 95 watt hours of charge to get the batteries back up to the absolute top. Maximum charge power that came in from the panels was 295 watts, but that's because, once again, we were not at 100%. So, but anyway, it's working really well. I love the fact that this is Bluetooth. It's really straightforward. All the information is on one page. It's very similar to the Victron. It's just everything's on one page, and the Victron's on 2 different pages. So it's pretty cool.